Welcome to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. I am your host, Molly Southgate, and today I'm interviewing
Sarah Henning. Hello.
Hey there. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah. So before we get started, I wanted to say to anyone listening that this is a very exciting episode because Sarah is officially the person that has been on the show, I believe, the most amount of times aside from me ever. This is the third time she's been on for the third book in the series. So it's very, very cool.
Yeah, I will take that. That's really exciting.
Yeah. So can you tell me about the book and about the whole series in general?
So this book is called The King Will Kill You, and it is the final book in the series of the Kingdoms of the Sand and Sky. It's a very long series name, but I call them the princess books. The first book is The Princess Will Save You. The second book is The Queen Will Betray You. And the third book is The King Will Kill You. And August 2nd, the third book will be out. And so if you're one of those people that likes to just read series straight through, now you actually get your chance. So that's pretty exciting. I can finally say that because I know people, they hold out. They don't want to be left in a cliffhanger. And these books are definitely full of cliffhangers. So they are a gender swapped sort of reverse damsel in distress inspired by The Princess Bride.
So my question kind of is on that. How did you work to keep up the Princess Bride inspiration through all three books?
Well, first of all, it's the best movie ever. So
yes,
that's not hard. The book is great too. I honestly, I was keeping a tally of all my favorite things about The Princess Bride that I kind of wanted to pay homage to. This is inspired by The Princess Bride. It's not necessarily a retelling, but it's inspired by the idea that, and I've probably said this on your show before, Molly, that Buttercup is a different person at the beginning of the tale than she is toward the end. And so if you haven't seen the movie and you've had 30 years to do it, or read the book, which is 40 years. So Buttercup is in love with Wesley. He's her farm boy. And she's very feisty at the beginning of the story. And then by the end, she is so distraught. She is marrying this awful Prince Humperdinck. And she just had this sham of a wedding. And she secures a private room and a dagger. And she decides, I can't be with my love Wesley. I'm just going to end it. And then Wesley comes in and saves her with a line about her boobs, which is not exactly the most feminist thing ever. And I was so frustrated because when I realized as an adult after watching the movie a bajillion times that Buttercup early on would have taken that dagger and fought her way out of that castle and fought her way to Wesley, wherever he was, because she was told different things about if he'd survived or not. And so I wanted to write a princess that would use that dagger every single time and would go after her true love. And so writing these books, it was all about, the main characters are in love from the very first page, that they are. So this isn't something where you watch characters fall in love. If anything, you watch them accept it and their relationship change. So throughout that, I wanted to keep the things I loved about The Princess Bride, kind of hat tips toward the As You Wish lines, although I have the villains say it. Luca, who's sort of the Wesley, he has his own way of saying that he loves Amarande. And I wanted to do kind of the rats of unusual size. I wanted to do the quicksand. I wanted to do the Indigo Montoya, you killed my father, prepare to die moment. And the coming back from the dead. I have a couple of different plays on that. Plus there's a wedding in every single book. Which was on purpose, and they're all very different. And 2 out of the 3 are terrible.
Oh, that's awesome! Thank you for sharing all of that. That the relationship between Amarande and Luca is one of my favorite things in the whole series to read because I just love the way that you write it. Because as you said, it feels like it's just them. There's no question. Yes. Throughout the entire thing. And I'm somebody that does love triangles in books and stuff like that. But it's written very well.
Well, thank you.
The way that it captures that.
Yeah. And they don't spend a lot of time together in the book. So in the very first book, she's chasing after him, trying to rescue him. He's stolen away by pirates. So that's another kind of nod to The Princess Bride. The second book, I knew I was going to be in trouble for people who were like, oh my God, they were never together in the first book. And then you're going to tear them apart in the second book. but not in like the most traditional way. It's not like they're breaking up or anything. They just realize that they have to go their own ways so they can be together forever. So the second book, they kind of go on their own paths. Luca has his own things he needs to do. Amarande has her own things she needs to do, and then they need to come back together. The third book, they are together so much it's a detriment. Like this is a problem, because they do have their own things that they need to worry about. I'm trying to be as vague as possible. But I actually think the third book is the most romantic book because there's more than just their relationship. We explore some of the other budding relationships in the book that I know readers enjoyed in the first two and wanted more of. And because I got a third book, this was originally a duology, and I was like, I have more to say. And Tor luckily was like, okay, which is hard to do during a pandemic. So I will always appreciate them for that. So those extra characters and extra romances and relationships get some space in the third book, which I really had fun doing.
Yeah, that's something that I've been really enjoying in the new book. Seeing all these characters getting fleshed out that you got introduced to in the second book, or even some like back in the first book that like didn't get their own like really big moments, you know?
Yeah, that was super fun to like figure out how I was going to do that so that everybody kind of got their own screen time per se.
Mm-hmm. So when writing this book, was some of the plot stuff like spillover from the second book, the original plot for the duology, or was it entirely it had to expand?
The very last scene, the epilogue in The Queen Will Betray You, was actually supposed to be the midpoint. So I knew I was in trouble when I plotted everything that went before it, and I was like, oh no. I think that's what I said to my editor, like, so I don't think I'm done. I have more to say. So I knew it didn't necessarily spill over. I just knew that there was another like jag of the road that I needed to explore. This book is almost like the denouement of the first two books. It's the aftermath. And you actually get to see what happens after they sort of ride into the sunset and try to stand on their own and figure out what's going to happen. And really like the whole thesis of this book is that the patriarchy never dies. It's like a zombie. And so, Amarande thinks that she gets what she wants and has everything she ever dreamed of by the end of the second book. And then the third book, cold-hearted reality about other people's ambitions kind of crashes in.
Yeah. And I love when books do that, especially something that I've noticed that happens a lot with like third books in the series, when it kind of like pulls the camera back a little bit and you get to see like what would happen after the happy ending kind of.
Yeah. And really, because I didn't know I was going to get that third book literally until like the last second, I feel like almost the second book doesn't feel like a bridge book, that you would usually get in a trilogy. It really doesn't necessarily feel that way until you get to the last page, probably.
And the second book, a lot of times with those bridge books, they can be not quite as good as the first and the final one. So and that's one that it really like stands on its own as a great book.
Thank you.
Which is always a plus when reading.
Yeah. Yes, for sure.
So what was it like writing the final book for a series that you've been working on for so many years at this point?
I mean, it was a relief because I knew I was going to get to say goodbye, because the entire time I was working on that second book and the pandemic is like in its infancy and just like raging. And I'm trying to not like virtual school my kids, not homeschool, but I was like the one who was like behind the scenes helping them virtually. It felt like it just felt like I wanted more and I wanted to say something more. And so honestly, like when I finally got a chance to plot everything out and talk to my editor about it, it was such a relief to be able to go back into the world and get a chance to say goodbye and, close up all the loose ends that I knew were still there, because Queen is such a heavy gas pedal book. It is so stuffed full of everything that like things were leaking out. And I was glad I got a chance to like scoop them up and really get a chance to just put a bow on it.
That is awesome. Yeah, I can imagine that it would be like a cathartic process.
Yeah, for sure. Like nothing is ever assured in publishing. Like for a long time, trilogies were the thing in young adult. And then they started getting canceled because people weren't buying the first book because they maybe wanted all three to come out, or some of the second books were disappointing because they were bridge books. And so we started seeing more duologies. I've written a duology, Sea Witch and Sea Witch Rising, and this was supposed to be that. And so I had never really thought like for sure that this third book would happen. And I'm so excited it did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really exciting. Congratulations on it publishing so soon.
Yay!
So has your writing process changed? Like from the start of this series to the end of it, or even the start of your like writing career to the end?
I mean, it has, because I've been working on more things where people need to know what I'm doing. So I used to be more of like a hybrid plotter pantser person. I knew the general nugget of what the story was about, and I kind of knew big things that would happen like along the spine of a story. But then I would kind of let things in between get me to each big moment and surprise me. Like I would kind of pants those things and let my subconscious lead. And now I still kind of do that, but at the same time, everybody needs to know what I'm doing, like my editor, my agent, and I work with multiple houses on different things. So they need to know where I am at any certain time, like in the story or in any certain project. And so I do tend to plot a little bit more, especially that first act. A lot of my projects are sold on proposal, which is a first act and a synopsis. And so that has changed how I write. I definitely am thinking a lot more about like the order things go in, ways to condense things, to make them faster, to make them more interesting, and kind of cut repetition. And so that is definitely, maybe my process has just become a little bit more like streamlined, I guess. I think my subconscious still does all the work, but it just happens in a different way than it used to.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's something I'm always interested about, because I know it changes once people start needing to know plot points and stuff as you're writing it.
Yeah. And also mine changed too, because I became a full-time writer with the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And so it used to be when I worked a full-time job that like I would almost be pent up by the time I got to write on the weekends. So like I've been thinking all week about what I was going to do, and I just like let it out like a fire hose Saturday and Sunday. And now it's like little more bite-sized chunks that are like spread out across the week. And so my subconscious is acting differently, and my plotting skills and my characterization skills are just, the pace is completely different than it used to be.
That's really cool. So do you have any tips for fantasy or YA authors?
Well, I think reading widely is really important. Honestly, like I've had a hard time reading in the pandemic. Audiobooks have been amazing, lifesaver, like so much so that I like have a Libby account specifically to go through stuff that I have on my shelf, like all these books I've bought that I haven't gotten to. If I can get it through the library and Libby and listen to it on my daily runs, it has been great, because I think, engaging in good storytelling will always make you a better storyteller. It's not that you're copying from somebody, but you are learning little tricks just by enjoying a story that you can incorporate later. Not that I'm like writing down like, this is how this person did it, but I think you just kind of pick up storytelling. And, when you become a writer, every book you've ever read, like, is reflected on the page. And it's kind of like every person you've ever met too. Like people are like, is that character based on someone? It's like, well, no, but like, we all have people in our lives, in different relationships that inspire us. I can't point to, any one character or plot point that is related to somebody I know, but like it's there in the background. Everything affects us and our writing and creativity. Like I have a poster that says creativity is intelligence having fun, which is completely accurate. So I do think reading widely, and I know when you get into writing, especially if you still have a full-time job, it is really hard to still read. I know that. Or like if you're doing a lot of beta reading for people, it can be really mentally taxing. But I think reading for fun, reading for pleasure, not reading because you feel like you have to know every single thing in your genre. In fact, reading widely, that's why I mentioned reading widely, like reading outside your genre can really just like stoke your creativity and fill that creative well. And it's important to do that, or you're just going to get burned out and feel like you're just like grabbing at straws when you're writing. For sure.
Oh yeah. And I know there's lots of writers too who like write in one genre and read in completely different
Yes.
ones. And I think that honestly, I think that can help. When you've got like really different interests like that, because the one genre can influence the other, and that's something common with musicians and artists, and like all different people.
Oh, yeah. Music and TV, like well-written TV, super helpful too for refilling that creative well. Like I know as writers, we always joke, especially YA writers, about listening to Taylor Swift all the time, but I do because she's a fabulous writer. And and she figures out ways to tell a story in a very condensed storytelling mode, right? And so it does help creativity. Like, I mean, even if you don't feel like you can read, you can totally listen to songs, right? So
did you have any specific ones that were inspiring for this book?
Taylor Swift songs?
Or just in general?
Actually, her whole first album that came out of the two, was that Folklore that was the first one? I'm like having a brain fart. It had a lot of songs on there that I like basically assigned to like each character. Like there's a song called Epiphany that reminded me of Coldo. And yeah, I mean, like I listened to that over and over and over again while I was writing both Queen and King. Actually, I listened to a lot of Taylor Swift last pandemic couple of years.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So, so you mentioned that you like to have audiobooks. What is the one you're currently listening to, or that you like just listened to?
I just finally finished Tweet Cute, which was absolutely adorable. It's by Emma Lord. It's a YA about these two high school seniors in New York who are on dueling social media accounts for their parents' companies. One owns like a giant burger chain and the other one owns this tiny deli in the East Village. And it was adorable. Like I knew it was, but like actually finally getting to it, it was really fun. I also, speaking of trilogies that are just finished the last one in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I think it's called Good is Dead. And that was a fabulous audiobook series. And it's full cast. So like you get all these other people who pop in and interviews and it's really cool. Like I really enjoyed that.
Oh, I always love the full cast ones too, because it opens it up so much, especially if you've already read the book too, and then it kind of leaves more for people listening to the audiobook as well.
Yeah. And I was finally reading also Firekeeper's Daughter, if you haven't read that, by Angeline Boulley. It won a ton of awards. And I saw Angeline speak. She came to speak in Lawrence, and I had her book and I hadn't finished it. But I got the audiobook and it was amazing, and just like ran through it.
That is awesome.
So good.
Oh, thank you for sharing.
I just went all over the place. 2 contemporaries and a fantasy.
That's great. That proves your point. What you're saying. Read widely.
Yeah.
So what's one thing you would want people to take away from The King Will Kill You?
Well, these books are all about like true love and going after what you want, and not settling necessarily for what the status quo is. We go into the books. Amarande literally is the most powerful person in her country and cannot get what she wants. And so, and she has to keep fighting for what she wants. It's kind of ridiculous, actually, but I think it's a good, I'm somebody who does not like conflict in real life. And writing characters like this remind me that like it's okay to fight for things, even if it makes other people uncomfortable. And I hope that people reading it, especially teenagers, like learn that lesson, like maybe figure out ways to speak up or go after what they want, even if it makes them uncomfortable, other people uncomfortable, but seems like the right thing to do.
That is an incredible message. And that totally feeds into what you were saying before about having it be a princess bride. Yeah. Like switch around having it, give her more agency in it too.
Yeah, for sure.
So which of the 3 books was the hardest for you to write?
The Queen Will Betray You was 100% the hardest to write. And I don't know if it was just the pandemic, or that I knew I wanted to stuff so much in. But it's also the most complicated plot of all of them. And there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot going on. I had to cut it 20,000 words to get it to fit. And, and it was that book. So not to spoil too much, but a character named Talifer, who is a bad guy in the first book, plays in very heavily in the second book. And I kept telling people that Talifer did this today, Talifer did that. And my mom hates him. And she was like, I cannot believe he is in this book so much. I don't understand what you're doing.
He was like my favorite character.
Yes. So then she read it. She got to finally read it. And she was like, okay, I get what you did. And I was like, yay. And actually, like, people saying that he was their favorite, or I really hated him in the first book and he was my favorite in the second book, I love, because that's exactly what I was trying to do this whole time. And actually, he was the easiest character to write in the whole freaking book. Luca, who I identify with the most as far as like my personality, was my problem child in that book. He made it so difficult. I actually had to pull out his entire arc because it's written in multi-POV. So every chapter with him, and work on it separately because he just wants to like hang out and have other people lead and like drink tea and like talk about feelings. And you can't do that with the position he was in. So he kept just deviating from what he was supposed to be doing all the time. And I didn't get him right until like the very last pass. He was my troublemaker for sure.
I think that's often like the case when it's a character that you identify with.
Yeah.
When it's someone that you resonate with, it gets harder to write, at least in what I've encountered.
100%. And you can't just, and he's a character where his personality isn't like the big, strong, like, character actor type of feel. Like it doesn't, he's not as clever as Talifer or like as mean or as cutting as other people. He is who he is. He's a nice guy. And yeah, he was, oh man, he was fun though. I mean, I'm glad when he figured everything out, it just kind of clicked, and he did it in his own way. You want to be true to the character, even when they're going through big changes.
Yes. Yeah. What was it like staying true to the characters when it's a world that you're also like that you've been writing in for so long? So I know sometimes that can happen with like debut authors, like for their new series where it's kind of, the characters are leading, but then as it goes on, I can imagine it would get a little murkier.
Yeah, it does get a little murkier. In fact, those scenes that are so fun to write where you have so many characters coming together and you have all these characters who had just talked around each other, haven't been in the same room, and then they're suddenly in the same room. And these books, a lot of the time, they're like around the council table, giving every person space and being true to what they would say in the situation and moving the plot forward and getting all the information out is really difficult to do. And it takes a lot of revision to try to make everything feel organic and move along, because I would just let them banter forever if that were up to me. But I'm not really allowed to do that because my books can't be 500 pages long because that's not what they planned for. So it can be really difficult because your brain can go one way in the first draft, and then like you have to keep pulling back and refining it. And then again, being true to the character. And, that takes a good editor too, who will come in and say, like, leave a note saying, I don't think this sounds like Ula. I don't think this sounds like Urtzi, and then you have to sort of rejigger things.
Well, yeah, I can imagine that would be tricky. Thank you for sharing all this. It was so great to talk to you today.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have any other questions?
I actually just have one more, and that is, what do you have coming up?
Oh gosh. Okay. So The King Will Kill You comes out in hardcover on August 2nd. And at the same time, the paperback for The Queen Will Betray You will be out. So if you're a paperback person, both Princess and Queen are in paperback. And then you can get all 3 hardcovers, which I sign out of my local bookstore, The Raven. If you follow me on Instagram, you can get the links to them and like get matching sets, which is pretty cool. And then let's see. So the next summer, in 2023, I have my first middle grade coming out. It's called Monster Camp. It's about a 11-year-old LARPer. She LARPs as a vampire who goes to a camp thinking it's for like people who like to LARP as monsters. And then she finds out she's actually the only human stuck in with monsters in camp.
That sounds awesome. I
really
feel
fun.
very seen by that book as someone who LARPs and has LARPed as a vampire.
You must understand. Well, so she meets a werewolf named Chad, and he's a jerk because werewolves are always mean to vampires, and she's stuck with him for a week, and all these other blood-sucking, scary things that she's always dreamed up. So it's super, super fun. So that comes out summer of 2023. And then I have I'm part of an anthology that comes out. It was supposed to come out 2023. Now it's 2024 in February. It is called A League of Our Own, and it is by all women and non-binary writers about girls in sports. And I have a cross-country story in there that's loosely based on real life. Because why not? Because my contemporary books that have been out, I had another one come out this year called It's On How You Fall, are all sportsy like. So,
well,
I have
that
a
is
mixed
all exciting. Good luck with everything. All of the new things coming out.
Thank you.
It's awesome to hear. I still can't get over the fact that this is the final book in the series. That's so cool.
I know. We've both aged so much. Like the way things have gone. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's wild. Because it started before the pandemic, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the first book came out in summer of 2020. So like when we were, planning, talking to people and doing things, we still thought like, it's going to open up, right? Like I had all these in-person things planned. Nope. Did not happen.
It's crazy with series like that to see like, oh my goodness, it's like a totally different world than when it first.
But and I hope that means that like people find this later, like I think there's a lot of great works that came out during the pandemic that I think hopefully people will find at a later date and enjoy.
Yes, for sure. And I mean, there still is a pandemic, so hopefully people are reading and still staying in.
I hope so. Yeah, for sure. For sure. But if you do get to a bookstore, all three of these books look really good together, I must say.
Everyone go check that out. For Read Between the Lines, my name is Molly Southgate.
I'm Sarah Henning.
Let's end this the way all great stories end. Happily ever after.
End. Thanks for having me, Molly.
Thank you for listening to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. You can follow the show on Instagram and Facebook at Read Between the Lines Podcast and on Twitter at RBTL Podcast. Make sure to follow the authors who I've been talking to hear all about their upcoming projects and also because they're cool people. This show is hosted by me, Molly Southgate, and produced and edited by my dad, Rob Southgate. Read Between the Lines is a Southgate Media Group production, and you can find all the great content put on by the network at southgatemediagroup.com. You can read the story of how I and many other podcasters started in the anthology book Pod Life, which you'll find at the link in the show notes. Also in the show notes are links to buy the books featured on this episode. Using those links supports this show and the incredible authors being interviewed. Have a great week and keep reading.